So I was born in upstate New York, and I was raised just outside of New York City. And I have an older sister and really cool, interesting, quirky parents who are both Montessori educators. So very much people that taught us to follow our passions in life and to live our lives out of the box. And also very religious. So Judaism was just always really important in the house in which I grew up. We lived our lives on a Jewish calendar. My parents helped create the Reform Synagogue in town. And my dad taught the bar mitzvah kids. My mom was the president, taught the preschool kids. And then I went to school growing up, also, my other passion was always the outdoors. I was always outside. I rode my bike across the country when I was 16 years old, long before people did things like that. And then I went to Cornell University, where I studied natural resources. And then I moved out west and started skiing full time and guiding in the summers. So that's kind of the...
And you're married and...
I'm married to an amazing man named Jeff. And we have 2 fabulous daughters. Ori is 7 months. No, she's 8 months today. She's 8 months today, and Sadie, our big girl, turned 4 on Sunday. So, yeah.
So one of the things I ask people is, what's your earliest memory of faith or of God or of anything in that realm?
I think faith and God to me are very connected to family, to Jewish rituals. And from an early age, I always played. I played Shabbat. Like my sister and I would have all our stuffed animals come around and we'd light the candles and sing the blessings. And my childhood rabbi, he tells the story that the reason that I became ordained rabbi is because when there were 5 kids and I was the 3 that we were friends with, another family, and our 2 that were kind of the big, very busy members of the synagogue. And after services were over, we'd always play synagogue. And my sister was the oldest, so she was the rabbi. And Michelle was next, so she was the cantor. Then came Karen, so she got to be the bat mitzvah girl. And Debbie and I had to be the congregation. So Rabbi Rubinstein always says that's how I became a rabbi. So I finally got to say, please rise. Succeeded. So.
What do you remember from that time? Was it just play, or did you have any sense of there being something bigger to it? Or?
I think for me it was a connection to my people, connection to history, connection to the community.
What did your parents teach you about God? Did you talk about God? Was there any talk of that, or?
I don't remember my parents talking about God. Yeah, I don't remember that. I think my dad, on the one hand, is very traditional, and he had a heart attack, and before he went in for his quadruple bypass or whatever it was, he made a deal with God. He said, God, if you let me survive, I'll go to shul every Saturday. And he told me this. I said, Dad, you go to shul every Saturday. What kind of deal is that? He's like, yeah, but I never promised. I promised. So I think he has, I think part of him is disbelief, and part of him is that God's something that you can kind of bargain with. And my belief is just totally, it doesn't fit with my belief at all. It may not even be his belief. I don't know. But I in my book I even struggle using the word. What word to use for God. And in my teaching I tend to use that which is greater than oneself, because to me that's what God is. I don't believe in a conscious interventionist God. I don't believe that you can pray to God and things happen. I don't believe that God intervenes in our lives. And it scares me every time I say it, but frankly I think if God can intervene in our lives, then God's doing a lousy job. It doesn't make sense to me. So I just can't carry that belief. but there's that feeling of connection between people and places, and maybe it's similar to chi or to ki, or to one of these other cultures' terms, but for me that's a better fit.
Tell me about the first time in your life where you experienced or had a sense of this greater, this energy
I don't
greater.
know that I can. I mean, for me, this is something that's just always been there, so it's hard, for me to say, well, this was like this profound moment when things were different than they were before. I mean, I know that when I started leading services, I was leading services for a congregation in Vail, Colorado, and it was very aware, as a lay leader this was, and I was very aware that when I was leading services, I felt at peace and things felt right. And I was really struggling with what to do career-wise. I was thinking of going back to medical school. And I was really torn up about what I should do. And I remember my friend Kate Lewin and I were sitting on the steps of the Bema, hanging out talking. And at this point I'd gotten into rabbinical school, which I didn't expect to get into, and I didn't know if I wanted to go. And she asked me, she said, well, what does it feel like when you lead services? And I told her how, I feel at peace, it feels right, I feel connected. She said, well, there's your answer. And I remember there was another time, that same time, when I was really struggling with what I wanted to do, and I was backcountry skiing in an area, it's called the Mushroom Bowl, it's behind Vail. It's this really rugged, beautiful area. And, that's not right. I skied there later and told the story. I was mountain biking because it was summertime, because I'd gotten accepted to school. So that would make more sense. I don't know. The season's wrong in my head. But anyway, I was in this really rugged, beautiful area. I don't know if I was on skis or a mountain bike. I can't remember. But, I remember just feeling like that there was a wisdom. There's a wisdom in this mountain, in the trees, and that if I could quiet myself enough to hook into that, then I could figure out what I needed to do.
Just give me a second.
That's fine.
What does it mean in your life to have faith?
I should say that faith is not a word I use. It's not one of my vocabulary words. When I think of faith, I think of a suspension of rational thought that allows one to believe in something that isn't provable. So faith that something will turn out okay, even if there's no reason to think that. You just it'll be okay. Have faith. This will be okay. Faith in a deity that isn't provable, but just suspend belief and suspend rationale, rational thinking, and then you're able to believe in it.
You're describing what you don't subscribe to.
That's what I think of when I think of the word faith.
So let's say someone comes on one of your programs, or what. I'm totally fine that your definition, or that you don't use the word, but I'm trying to figure out what in the sphere of. Let me not come to it through my vocabulary then.
I mean, I use the word religion. I'll say I'm a religious person.
Uh-huh.
I just wouldn't, like, I wouldn't say I'm a person of faith. I would say I'm a religious person. But I don't know if that's the same thing that you're talking about.
I guess the question would be, what's the role of, I want to make sure I use your words again, you didn't say a power greater than yourself, but
that which is greater than myself?
That which is greater than myself. What's the role of that which is greater than myself in our lives? In your life?
To me, one of the most profound experiences we have as human beings is our ability to connect with other people, with places that are members of this earthly community. And I think that it's, for lack of a better word, the God that's in each of those things that allows us to connect, or that we notice, doesn't allow us to connect, that we notice when we connect with each other. So I think connecting with that gives us the understanding that we are responsible to one another and to the planet. So that's one gift. Another gift is a opportunity for tranquility, for peace. So I think when we, Job is this amazing story about this man who all these terribly tragic things happened to. And they happened to him for a really good reason. I mean, God made a bet with Satan. And, right, you know the story, right? He makes this bet. And so God says, hey, look at my great guy, Job. And Satan says, of course he's great. You give him everything he wants. Take it away and see what's going to happen. So God says, okay, take it away. So take everything away. And Job's like, what's happening? God, this isn't right. This isn't right. And cries out to God. And then Job actually gets an answer from God, which is amazing. It's the only enviable thing that happens to him. But he gets this answer, and God really actually has an answer to why these bad things happen to him. They happened to him because I had this bet with Satan. And we won. Yay, us. Here's all your stuff back. Right? God could have done that. It's God, right? But that's not what God does. God instead takes Job on this whirlwind tour of the wilderness. And in the end, Job says he's comforted because he is dust and ashes. And the commentary that I'm most comfortable with in the translation that I think is really quite amazing, I forget where it's, Stephen, forget the author, but he's comforted that he's dust and ashes. He's comforted that he too, just like everything else in the world, ultimately is dust and ashes. He's connected to all things. Ultimately, we're all the same and we're all connected. And that's the source from which he draws his comfort. So I think that when we connect with that sense that we are part of something larger, it's a tremendous opportunity to find comfort and to find meaning in a life which is just tough and rough sometimes.
What are you most grateful for?
Gosh, I think I am grateful for so many things, but the first thing that comes to mind is my health, because if I wasn't healthy, I wouldn't be able to have all my relationships, which are so important. And my smarts wouldn't work so well if I wasn't healthy. Wouldn't matter so much if I lived in a free country or not, if I wasn't healthy. So I'll go with my health.
Take health for 200. What's your greatest wish?
Oh, my greatest wish? I wish we'd take better care of this planet. I wish that we'd stop just all the abusive practices that we have come to just incorporate in our lives. I wish everyone would just get behind that. And if we all just put our brains and our desire behind taking care of the planet, we probably wouldn't have war, probably wouldn't have sickness, I mean, probably wouldn't have poverty, you know, if we could just all work together towards one thing, but who gets to decide the one thing, I guess.
It's a new name for God.
Right.
He that gets to decide the one thing.
But he doesn't. See, that's the thing. That's why I don't think God does that.
Mm.
Really, you know, people that say I'm doing this in God's name, I don't buy it. Why would God like that so much better than this? I don't care. And people, you know, it's interesting because I was meeting with a family who had a loved one that was dying, and they were really, you know, angry at God and all this, the normal emotions people go through. And I shared with them my belief in God, and they just couldn't get it. They couldn't get why I would call something God that couldn't intervene in our lives. Mm-hmm. Why I would call something God that wasn't conscious. To them, that was just didn't work, couldn't go together. And then they just couldn't get it that I was a rabbi. That actually had been ordained, you know. But I am. And I was ordained at a very mainstream school, so.
Yeah, I don't take to what you're saying to be humanist either.
Right, it's not that there isn't a God. It's just redefining. Because, I mean, you know, a lot of it's similar in parts to what Buber said. It's similar to what Spinoza said. Of course, he was excommunicated, so.
What did Buber say?
Buber talks about that relationships in which we approach someone for the essence of we engage in the essence, you know, not for what someone can do for us. Right. You know, that when we have those relationships, we're experiencing God.
And what did Spinoza say?
Spinoza believed, so this is what was confusing with him, is some people said that he thought that that tree is God, but I don't think that's what he was saying. I think that he was saying that experiences in nature can be a spiritual springboard to experience God. I think Spinoza would be very popular today. I don't think he would have had such a problem.
Just the Haskalah came a little too early.
I guess so.
So when people see your portrait that we'll make, what do you want them to know about you?
I would like them to know that you can be a rabbi and be an adventurous woman.
Are you recruiting?
Am I recruiting? No, I didn't think of it that way. But I think part of what my goal is with the Adventure Rabbi program is to take back the ownership or the proprietorship of religion from people who say it has to be done. You know, you're not a religious Jew unless you go to services on Saturday mornings. You're not an affiliated Jew unless you go to synagogue. You're a member of a synagogue. You know, I don't buy that. And I think there's so many people running around that say, well, I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious. The mountains are my temple. And I think that a lot of these people really are not just spiritual, but religious. They just need a little education to show how what they're doing is actually Jewish. But, you know, Judaism got started, and so did Christianity, therefore, got started in the wilderness. And I just think that there's certain really beautiful lessons that we get best when we're outdoors that once you move inside, you know, we just kind of lost track of. Or certain lessons that maybe we even know about and we teach about indoors, like the idea of cultivating patience, ideas of rediscovering the awe in the world. But somehow when you teach them inside, they just kind of lose their pizzazz. People just can't get them. You know, I'll have the experience where I will take a group of people that, you know, they've sung the Shema prayer for years. You know, like, it's nothing. They say it by heart, blah, blah, blah. Take them out to this beautiful wilderness spot and have them experience that same prayer in this different environment where, let's say they're standing on top of a peak. Say we're doing a peak climb, which is on top of the peak, and you know that feeling when you're on the top of the peak where it's so awesome and there's just no words. Like all you can say is like, wow. Or maybe you say, oh my God, which is interesting in itself, right? It's that's the experience you're supposed to have when you're praying. And whoever has that, I mean, I guess lots of people do, but people I work with don't. So you take that experience that's already there, that feeling of, and then you add the Shema to it. You say the Shema from that place, and suddenly this prayer comes out as a prayer of thanks, of connection, of gratitude, of striving, of hope. Of all these different emotions get laden in there and just like sent out over this valley. And suddenly Judaism is like relevant and meaningful and accessible. And I didn't teach anything new. I just took what they already knew and put them on top of a 14,000 foot peak.
So funny, I normally don't add commentary, but I will today.
Okay.
Years ago I was at it in Phoenix, either on Squaw Peak or Camelback. And I remember someone who was obviously Christian got up at the top and just started screaming, "Thank you, God! Thank you, God!" And at first I was judgmental. Or, I grew up in the South. So, like, oh, okay. And I thought, oh, no.
Right?
That's exactly right.
That's right.
Yeah.
I on occasion go to Christian services and, the one I go to is at the top of a ski resort, and the preacher always starts out by saying, what a beautiful day the Lord has given us. And so I say that now, and I say it jokingly, I say it tongue-in-cheek, but I really mean it. But the only way I can get it out of my mouth, or the only way I can get it out of my mouth and have someone actually hear it is tongue-in-cheek, but I really mean it. It's this mixture sort of.
I had a rabbi in USY who used to do our USY encampment at Camp Blue Star in Hendersonville, North Carolina.
Yeah.
And he used to do the Bernice and Scott. He was from Savannah. And so for Bernice and Scott, it would be like, and I thank the Lord that I could get up this morning and eat my breakfast. And then all of us, USY would be like, hallelujah, praise the Lord.
Oh, that's some praying. That's some praying.
Yeah. So tell me about your experience of becoming the adventure rabbi. I'm not looking for a history lesson. More of what called you.
Yeah.
And how did it evolve for you?
So, you'll read in the book the actual story, but.
And I'm particularly interested in if there was an experience where some clarity came to you.
Yeah, total experience. Base of the Grand Canyon. We backpacked in. It was March 2001. I think, March 2001. We backpacked in with a group of students from Williams College to do an adoption and baby naming service for a 1-year-old named Mariah Colorado Lewis, who her parents, Bernice and Scott, had adopted from Romania. And they wanted to do her conversion and her baby naming in the Holy of Holies, base of the Grand Canyon. So we hiked down. Scott's the director of the Williams outdoor program. So he brought 12 kids with him. We're down there in the base of this canyon with this group of students, coincidentally were Jewish, most of them, who, if you asked them what their religion was, they would give you answers like, I'm a BuJew, I used to be really religious, but, it doesn't speak to me anymore, it's not accessible, running is my religion, all those answers. We're down there in the base of this canyon, and I do the ceremony for this baby, it's infant, no, it's not infant, well, toddler, I guess. And I took the Jewish traditional words, Yevרכך Adonai וישמרך, may God bless you and keep you, and combine them with the wisdom of the canyon. May you have the wisdom of the rocks. May you have the wisdom of the Colorado River, which knows which rocks to flow around, which rocks to flow over, which rocks to patiently work your way through. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'yichunecha. May you have the tenacity of you got the idea. So the whole service was combining, these two things. And you should have seen the faces of these students when I was finished, when Mariah was being held by her mom and her dad, and they're dunking in a Colorado River up in their mikvah. They come out and surrounded by this red rock. And the students came up to me afterwards and they were like, I had no idea Judaism could be like this. I had no idea. Like, tell me more. We spent the whole week, hiking around in the canyon, talking about Judaism as I know it, which is totally different than the Judaism they were brought up with Avinu Malkeinu, my father, our father, our king, have mercy on us, pardon us. I was talking about a totally different God. And I was talking about, they're thinking about Judaism as this religion that requires this, this, and this from them. And I'm talking about a Judaism that enhances my life and helps me become a better person and have a more meaningful existence. And I'd been a congregational rabbi for a few years at that point and really struggled with it. Like, I really felt like I just couldn't reach the people. There was so much protocol in the way. Things had to be done this way and not that way, and the board had to approve this and not that, and you can do this but not the other. And suddenly, I was near the base of the Grand Canyon, with 12 kids, just doing my thing. And they got jazzed about Judaism in a way that I never would have gotten them jazzed in a synagogue. And one of them actually is Bethy, is going to rabbinical school. She's applying for rabbinical school right now. The BuJew. Came all the way back. And it came out of the canyon, and I had been so pessimistic about the survival of Judaism in America. I just couldn't get how, or reformed, progressive Judaism. Just couldn't see how possibly it was going to work. And I came out of the canyon, and I was like, you know what, this is how it's going to work. This is one of the ways in which it's going to work. It came out, and I drove all the way back to Canada, and I resigned from my position a couple months later. Moved back down to the States, to Boulder, Colorado. And in November of that same year, 2001, I started the program. And it's amazing because since then, I have brought hundreds, if not thousands, of people back. And now with the book, probably tens of thousands of people back to a joyful relationship with Judaism. And some of them, we've actually had 2 students go on to be rabbis now. But so some, or 3, one. So some of them will come back to organized religion. They'll come back to synagogues and federations and JCCs. But even if most of them don't, they're now walking around for the first time in their lives being joyful about their Jewish identity. Not dissing it, not hiding it, not being angry at it, but just embracing it and being, jazzed about being Jewish. So that's, it's working. It's working.
Is there a prayer or a tefillah or something that has most meaning for you in Judaism? It could be from Torah, or it could be...
Before I answer that, I want to add one thing, is that I sometimes think that God is laughing at me or with me. It's like, you know what, Korngold, you believe whatever you want. You believe whatever you want. As long as you keep getting them in the door, then we'll sit down when you get up here to heaven. We'll have some schnapps and talk about it. So part of me back there just still wants to have that dad up in the sky who's gonna, fixing things and I can, negotiate. The most meaningful prayer, the most amazing prayer that I've ever heard was the first time that my 2-year-old at the time said the Shema by herself. The pronunciation, she goes, Echad. She gets Echad. She's like, that kid will be very proud of her. I'm just that, I went to the workshop on sounds. We started with what is your favorite sound? And I said that my favorite sound was the sound of my daughter chewing. That sound of somebody chewing. My favorite sound was her chewing, because when a child can feed themselves, they're gonna be okay. It's a big milestone. They can actually chew for themselves. And so when they can feed themselves, so hearing her chewing was always very striking for me. And so same thing, like she learned to feed herself, and now she can say the Shema by herself. Now she's 4, now she's got a lot more prayers in there too. So that's, and then, I've got so many, a prayer that is instructive to what I do, the V'ahavta, which is so important in that it teaches us that Jewish ritual shouldn't just be in the synagogue or at home. It's on your way. It's on your way. Teach it on your way. Learn it on your way. Pray it on your way. And that's the prayer that reminds me daily that Judaism shouldn't just be grace before meals. Judaism has to be the way you pick up your dirty socks. It has to be every little piece in your life. Otherwise, then it's just the sprinkles on top of the cake, which is nice, but a cake is still good without the sprinkles.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.